My daughter told me I wasn't welcome at Christmas anymore. She said, and I quote, "You embarrassed the family." For a few seconds, Linda Whitfield could not even answer. She stood in the middle of her small apartment with a roll of wrapping paper in one hand and the phone pressed against her ear.
Linda, I am so sorry. I won't be able to make it home for Christmas. Please forgive me.
On the table were gifts for her 2 grandchildren, already tagged in careful handwriting. A red sweater for Mason, a science kit for Emma. Linda had spent weeks choosing them. But Rachel did not ask about the gifts. She did not ask whether her mother had plans. She simply said Christmas would be better without her there. Linda did not cry. She did not argue. She went home, opened a locked filing drawer, and mailed Rachel the deed to her house. What Rachel did not know was that Linda had owned that house for 11 years. The envelope arrived on a Wednesday afternoon, just 3 days before Christmas. Rachel was standing in her kitchen, watching snow gather along the edge of the back patio, when the delivery driver asked for her signature. She expected a package, maybe one of the children's gifts, maybe something David had ordered and forgotten to mention. Instead, she found a manila envelope with her mother's handwriting across the front. No Christmas card, no return gift, no emotional message, just her name, her address, and a certified mail receipt. Inside was a legal document Rachel had not seen in more than a decade. And when she saw the name printed beside the words sole property owner, the warmth left her face. It was not David's name. It was not hers. It was Linda Whitfield's. The document was dated 11 years earlier, back when Rachel and David were young parents, when they had 2 small children and a mortgage they could barely afford. Back when David's business failed, their savings disappeared, and the bank gave them 30 days to make a payment they did not have. Rachel remembered that time. She remembered the late-night calls, the letters from the bank, the way David stayed up at the kitchen table pretending to work while staring at numbers that did not add up. But there was one thing Rachel had tried very hard to forget. The person who stepped in when everyone else was unavailable was the same person Rachel had just called an embarrassment. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Because this story is not only about a house, a deed, or a Christmas invitation. It is about what happens when a person spends years giving everything they have to people who slowly begin to treat their love like an obligation. It is about the dangerous comfort of assuming someone will always forgive you. And it is about the moment one mother finally decided that silence was no longer the same thing as peace. Linda Whitfield was 61 years old and lived alone in a modest apartment in Columbus, Ohio. She worked 3 days a week at a small accounting office, even though she could have retired years earlier if life had gone the way she once imagined it would. Her apartment was clean, quiet, and filled with little reminders of a life built around other people. A framed school photo of Rachel at age 9. A picture of Mark, Linda's younger son, holding a trout during a father-son fishing trip he took with Tom before Tom died. A refrigerator covered in drawings from Mason and Emma. Linda did not own expensive things. She did not travel. She drove an aging Toyota with a faded bumper sticker that said, "Proud Grandma." But Linda had one quality that had shaped every decision she made. When someone she loved was in trouble, she showed up. She had learned that from her parents in Dayton. Her father worked in a factory for most of his life, and her mother cleaned houses for families who had more rooms than Linda's family had people. They did not have extra money, but they always had an extra plate at the table. If a neighbor was sick, Linda's mother brought soup. If someone lost a job, her father found a way to lend them money without making them feel small. Linda grew up believing that dignity meant helping people without turning their hardship into a performance. You did what needed to be done. You did not expect applause. You did not remind people what they owed you. She carried that lesson into adulthood. For a long time, it made her strong. Later, it made her easy to overlook. Linda met Tom Whitfield when she was 22. He was steady, funny, and kind in the way that mattered most to her. He fixed things without being asked. He remembered birthdays. He danced badly but confidently at weddings. They had Rachel first, then Mark 3 years later, and for a while life felt ordinary in the best possible way. They bought a small home. Tom worked in maintenance at a hospital. Linda worked in bookkeeping. They did not have much, but they had enough. Then, when Rachel was 9 and Mark was 6, Tom collapsed at work from a heart attack. He was 40 years old. Linda became a widow before she had learned how to imagine herself as anything else. Tom left behind life insurance money, but not enough to make Linda secure forever. She could have used it to make the next few years easier. She could have paid off her home, moved somewhere smaller, or stopped working overtime. Instead, she put most of it away. She told herself it was for Rachel and Mark if a real emergency ever came. For 15 years, Linda protected that money. She worked through tax seasons until midnight. She skipped vacations. She wore the same winter coat for nearly a decade. She paid Rachel's college expenses without telling Rachel how many extra weekend clients it took to cover them. She helped Mark relocate to Colorado when he got his first real job. And each time, Linda smiled and said, "That's what family does." Rachel did not grow up ungrateful. At least, not at first. She adored her mother as a child. Linda was the person who packed school lunches, stayed up late to help with science projects, and clapped the loudest at every recital and graduation. But as Rachel became older, she became sharply aware of the differences between her family and the families around her. She noticed that Linda bought clothes at thrift stores. She noticed that their car was older than the cars outside her friends' homes. Embarrassment about struggling. She never said it out loud. She barely admitted it to herself. Yet it sat inside her and grew stronger whenever she entered a room full of people who seemed to have never worried about money. At Ohio State, Rachel met David Calloway. David came from the kind of family Rachel had spent years observing from a distance. His parents lived in a large home outside Cincinnati. They had a lake house. They knew people at restaurants by name. Holidays were catered. His mother, Carol Calloway, had a graceful voice and an elegant smile, but she had a habit of turning judgment into polite conversation. Carol never openly insulted Linda. She did not need to. She could look at Linda's handbag and say, "That is such a practical choice." She could see Linda arrive in a modest dress and say, "You always look so comfortable." And everyone in the room understood what she meant, even if no one confronted her. David loved Rachel, and Rachel loved David. But Rachel wanted badly to belong in his world. In the beginning, Linda was included. She came to birthdays, barbecues, holiday dinners, and the couple's first Christmas after marriage. She brought homemade dishes and gifts she had chosen carefully. She helped Rachel after Mason was born. She stayed overnight when Emma had the flu. She drove 2 hours in a snowstorm because Rachel called at midnight and said she could not handle another night alone while David was traveling for work. Linda arrived without hesitation. She always did. Yet over time, Rachel began acting differently around David's family. She started correcting Linda's grammar in front of people. She stopped asking her mother to company events. When Linda offered to bring food to certain gatherings, Rachel would say Carol had already arranged catering. The distance did not happen in one dramatic moment. It arrived in small decisions. An invitation sent late. A phone call not returned. A family photo where Linda was asked to stand at the end. Rachel began saying things such as, "Mom, maybe don't bring that up tonight." Or, "You know Carol can be particular." Linda heard those words and told herself they did not mean much. She told herself Rachel was stressed. She told herself that families were complicated. What she did not tell herself was the truth. She was beginning to feel like a visitor in her own daughter's life. Then came the night Rachel called 11 years earlier. It was late. Linda had already gone to bed, but when she saw Rachel's name on her phone after 11 o'clock, she answered immediately. Rachel was crying so hard at first that Linda could barely understand her. David had started a logistics business with two friends. The business had looked promising for a while, but one contract fell through, then another. Their partners left. Bills mounted. Their savings vanished. Rachel and David had missed 3 mortgage payments. The bank had issued a foreclosure notice. They had 30 days before the process moved forward. Rachel did not ask Linda for money right away. She said she only needed to talk. But Linda knew her daughter well enough to hear the fear beneath every pause. Rachel was terrified, not only of losing the house, but of what losing it would mean. Mason had just started kindergarten. Emma was still small enough to believe every crisis could be solved by her mother. David had not told his parents how bad things were. Rachel begged Linda not to tell anyone, especially Carol. "She already thinks I'm not good enough for David," Rachel said. "If she knows we're losing the house, she'll never let me forget it." Linda listened. Then she asked Rachel to come over the next morning. Rachel arrived exhausted, wearing the same clothes she had worn the night before. Linda made coffee. She sat her daughter at the kitchen table. Then Linda opened a drawer Rachel had never paid attention to and pulled out documents Rachel did not understand. The money Tom had left behind was still there. Linda had protected it for 15 years. She had imagined using it for her own retirement one day. She had imagined it as the last safety net she had. But when she looked at Rachel across that table, she did not think about retirement. She thought about her daughter, her grandchildren, and the fear in Rachel's face. Linda told Rachel she would help. What Linda did was more than lend money. She paid off the remaining mortgage balance in full, $189,000. But there was a complication. David did not know Rachel had called Linda. He did not know the full extent of their financial trouble, and Rachel did not want him to know where the money came from. She feared he would feel ashamed. She feared his parents would find out. She feared Carol would turn it into proof that Rachel had trapped David into a life he should not have chosen. So an attorney arranged an agreement. Linda would legally purchase the property. Rachel and David would remain in the home. When they were financially stable, they could refinance and purchase it back. There would be no interest, no pressure, and no public humiliation. Rachel signed the papers. Linda signed the papers. The foreclosure stopped. David believed a private loan had saved them. The children stayed in their rooms. The family moved forward. At least, that was how it looked from the outside. But Rachel never found the courage to tell David the truth. A year passed. Then 2. David found steady work. Their finances improved. Eventually, he started another business that did well. Rachel mentioned refinancing once, then avoided the subject when Linda said they could begin the process whenever she was ready. The truth had become too old, too complicated, too embarrassing to bring into the open. So Rachel did what many people do when they are afraid of a difficult conversation. She delayed it. Then she avoided it. Then she acted as if it had never existed. Linda could have forced the issue. She could have demanded repayment. She could have told David herself. She could have told Carol. But she did none of those things. She watched her daughter become more distant. She watched Rachel let Carol's opinions shape the atmosphere of family events. She watched her grandchildren grow, always happy to see her, but sometimes asking why Grandma could not come to a dinner or a party. Linda would give them gentle answers. Grandma had plans. Maybe next time. She protected Rachel, even when Rachel was not protecting her. By the time the Christmas phone call happened, Linda had spent years accepting less than she deserved. Still, something about Rachel's words changed the equation. "You embarrassed the family." Linda had heard versions of that message before. In Carol's comments. In Rachel's careful instructions before gatherings. In the invitations that stopped coming. But this time, it came directly from her daughter. The daughter whose home she had saved. The daughter whose fear she had carried like it was her own. The daughter who had never once explained to David that his home existed because Linda had given up the one source of security she had saved from Tom. After the call, Linda sat in silence for almost an hour. Then she opened the filing cabinet. She found the original deed. She found the property agreement. She found the documents Rachel had signed and apparently hoped would remain buried forever. Linda did not decide to sell the house. She did not call a lawyer to remove Rachel. She did not make threats. She simply put a copy of the deed in a certified envelope and attached a yellow note. On it, she wrote, "I thought you should know whose house you are embarrassed to invite me to. Love, Mom." Then she mailed it. Rachel opened the envelope 3 days later. David was home because he had taken the week off before Christmas. At first, Rachel looked confused. Then David saw the document. He asked what it was. Rachel tried to speak, but no explanation came easily. David read the deed once. Then again, he saw Linda's name. He saw the date. He looked at Rachel, and for the first time in their marriage, he realized there was an entire chapter of their life he had never been told. Rachel spent the next 3 hours telling David everything. The failed business, the foreclosure, the money, the agreement, her fear of his parents, her decision to remain silent. David listened without interrupting, but the more he learned, the more his expression changed. He was hurt that Rachel had kept such a secret from him, but he was also disturbed by a question he had never asked himself before. Why had Rachel been so afraid of his mother's judgment that she would rather let Linda sacrifice everything than allow Carol to know the truth? That question stayed with David. He began remembering moments he had ignored. Carol commenting on Linda's clothes. Carol laughing when Linda mispronounced the name of an expensive wine. Rachel growing tense whenever Linda spoke too freely at a party. David had always brushed these things aside. He had told himself Carol was old-fashioned. He had told himself Rachel was overly sensitive. But now he saw the pattern. Linda had not embarrassed anyone. Linda had simply reminded Rachel of the life she came from, and Rachel had spent years trying to outrun that reminder. Rachel did not call Linda immediately. Shame can make people do strange things. It can make an apology feel harder than the cruelty that created the need for one. For nearly 2 weeks, Rachel stared at the deed. She looked at the note. She avoided her mother's calls, even though Linda only called once to ask whether the envelope had arrived. Rachel could not bring herself to answer. Then, on a cold Saturday morning, she drove to Linda's apartment without calling ahead. Linda saw Rachel's car from her kitchen window. She had been making oatmeal. She stood still for a moment, spoon in hand, then walked to the door. When she opened it, Rachel looked smaller than Linda remembered. Physically smaller, emotionally smaller, like someone who had finally stopped defending herself against the truth. Rachel began with the words she had practiced in the car. "Mom, I'm sorry." But before she could say more, she started crying. Not the controlled crying she had done when she called about the mortgage. This was different. This was the kind of crying that comes when the story you have told yourself about your own life finally falls apart. Linda did not make Rachel stand in the hallway. She stepped aside and said, "Come in. You must be freezing." It was such a Linda thing to say that Rachel cried harder. They sat at the same kitchen table where Rachel had once begged for help 11 years earlier. This time, there were no bank notices, no foreclosure letters, no urgent numbers. Only a mother and a daughter facing the damage caused by years of silence. Rachel admitted that she had been ashamed. Not of Linda, exactly, but of herself. She had spent so long trying to prove she belonged with David's family that she began treating her own mother like evidence of something she wanted to hide. She had allowed Carol's judgment to become more important than Linda's love. She had convinced herself Linda would always understand, always forgive, always wait. Linda listened. Then she told Rachel something that Rachel had not expected. "I did understand," Linda said. "That's why I stayed quiet for so long. But understanding someone does not mean letting them keep hurting you. Those words stayed with Rachel. They were not shouted. They were not cruel. But they were impossible to escape. Linda explained that sending the deed was not about taking the house. It was about refusing to be erased from a story she had helped make possible. Rachel wanted to know whether Linda planned to sell the home. Linda looked at her and said, "I never wanted your house. I wanted my daughter." For Rachel, that was the moment the full weight of what she had done finally landed. Christmas morning was different that year. Linda arrived early. Mason and Emma ran to the door before Rachel could reach it. David greeted Linda warmly, awkwardly at first, but sincerely. He had called her a few days earlier and thanked her for what she had done 11 years before. He apologized for never knowing. Linda told him he had nothing to apologize for, but David said he did. He said he should have noticed how his family treated her. He should have protected Rachel from the pressure she felt. And he should have asked more questions when parts of their life did not make sense. Carol was not there that Christmas. Rachel had told her that the day was for immediate family. Carol was offended, of course. But for once, Rachel did not rush to manage Carol's feelings. She let her mother-in-law be upset. She let the silence exist. It was uncomfortable, but it was honest. Linda sat at the table with her grandchildren beside her. No one placed her at the far end. No one corrected her. No one made her feel like a guest. For the first time in years, she did not have to prove that she belonged. A month later, Linda met with the attorney who had handled the original agreement. She transferred the house back into Rachel and David's names. She did not ask for repayment. She did not attach conditions. She did not make a ceremony of it.
There you go, all signed.
Thank you, that's everything.
Rachel received the final papers with another short note from Linda. It said, "It was always meant to be yours. I was only keeping it safe." Rachel placed that note in a frame in her office, where she would see it every day. The deed was never the real point. The house was never the real point. The envelope mattered because it forced Rachel to see something she had refused to see for years. The woman she considered an embarrassment had been the quiet foundation beneath her entire life. Linda did not need a grand apology in front of Carol. She did not need repayment. She needed the truth to be acknowledged. She needed her daughter to understand that love should never be confused with weakness, and silence should never be mistaken for permission. So what would you have done in Linda's place? Would you have mailed the deed? Would you have confronted Rachel years earlier? Or would you have remained quiet and hoped your daughter eventually understood? Let us know in the comments. And if this story reminded you of someone who has given more than they ever received, share it with them. Sometimes the people who carry families on their backs are the very people who need to be reminded that they deserve a seat at the table too. And that, right there, is the story of Linda Whitfield. A woman who never asked for recognition. A woman who never demanded credit. A woman who spent decades folding herself smaller so that the people she loved could stand taller. And when she finally decided she had been invisible long enough, she did not raise her voice. She did not make a scene. She simply mailed the truth in a manila envelope and let it speak for itself. There is something deeply human about Linda's story. It does not belong only to her. It belongs to every person who has ever sacrificed quietly and been rewarded with silence. It belongs to every mother who has driven through a snowstorm at midnight without being asked. Every parent who skipped dinner so there would be enough food for the children. Every person who gave away the one thing they were saving for themselves because someone they loved needed it more. We know those people. Some of us were raised by them. Some of us, if we are being truly honest with ourselves, have been Rachel at some point in our lives. We have looked at someone who loved us completely and found it easier to manage our own discomfort than to honor what they gave us. What makes Linda's story remarkable is not the deed. It is not the 11 years of legal ownership. It is not even the certified envelope or the 7 words on the yellow note. What makes it remarkable is that Linda never stopped loving Rachel through any of it. Not during the missed invitations. Not during the corrected grammar. Not during Carol's polite cruelties that Rachel allowed to go unanswered. Not even when Rachel looked her in the eye and told her she was an embarrassment. Linda mailed that envelope not as a weapon, but as a mirror. She held it up and said, without drama, without accusation, without a single raised voice, "Look at what you have been doing, and look at who you have been doing it to." And Rachel looked, and she did not look away. That is where the real story lives. Not in the legal documents, or the financial figures, or the sequence of events that led to one December phone call. It lives in that kitchen on a cold Saturday morning, when a daughter finally stopped running from the truth, and a mother opened the door anyway. It lives in the moment Linda said, "I never wanted your house. I wanted my daughter." Because that sentence contains everything you need to know about who Linda Whitfield is and what she has always been willing to give. It lives in the Christmas morning when two grandchildren ran to the door before anyone else could reach it, because children always know who actually loves them. And it lives in the quiet January afternoon when Linda signed the house back without ceremony, without conditions, and without ever once making Rachel feel smaller than she already felt. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of someone you know, if it made you think about a relationship in your own life where love has been given more freely than it has been received, then we have done what we came here to do. Stories like Linda's do not often make the news. They do not trend on social media. They happen in small apartments and kitchen tables and cold parking lots and long phone calls that nobody else ever hears. But they matter. They matter more than most of the things we pay attention to. And they deserve to be told with the care and the weight they have always carried. If you are watching this on Fantascribe Codex and you have not yet subscribed, now is the time. Hit that subscribe button right now and join a community of people who believe that the most powerful stories are not always the loudest ones. Every week on Fantascribe Codex, we bring you stories exactly like this one. Stories about real people, real decisions, real consequences, and the kind of quiet courage that changes lives without ever asking for applause. We find the stories that live beneath the headlines, and we tell them the way they deserve to be told, with honesty, with depth, and with the full weight of everything they contain. And if this video gave you something today, whether it was a feeling, a memory, a question you need to sit with, or simply the reminder that the quiet people in your life deserve to be seen, please give it a like. It takes 1 second, and it helps this story reach someone else who may need it just as much as you did. Leave a comment below and tell us what this story brought up for you. Tell us about a Linda in your life. Tell us about a moment when you were Rachel and what you did about it. Tell us where you are watching from. Because this community spans every corner of this country, and we love knowing who is in the room with us. Every comment you leave, we read. Every story you share in that comment section matters to us, because you matter to us. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. You already know who that person is. It might be a mother who has given more than she has ever been thanked for. It might be a daughter who is in the middle of a Rachel moment right now and needs the mirror. It might be a friend, a sister, a neighbor, or someone you have been meaning to call for months. Send it to them. Because sometimes the most important thing we can do for the people we love is hand them a story and say, quietly, and without pressure, "I thought of you when I heard this." This is Fantascribe Codex. We tell the stories that stay with you, and we will see you in the next one.